The military has been an important institution for protecting states from external threats since antiquity. In fulfilling this fundamental role, military institutions have also posed security risks to their own governments, given that the ability to use coercive force, though necessary to defend the nation against the threats, creates the danger that the military will turn its weapons on the very regime that empowered its existence. Military coups, defined as when the military or a section of the military turns its coercive power against the apex of the state, establishes itself there, and then the rest of the state takes its orders from new regime, have been relatively common in post-independent African states, thereby raising several issues including how to understand the relationship between politics and military coups. This video contributes to the discussion by highlighting how coups are a continuation of politics by other means, particularly in the West African states. Going back into history, African states have experienced over 200 military takeovers between the 1960s and 2012. Many analysts believed that coups were going out of fashion in Africa by 2015 due to the limited cases on the continent. And at present, coups are widely seen to be on the rise again as countries such as Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, Mali, Chad, Sudan, and Burkina Faso have experienced a series of successful and failed military takeovers over the last 3 years. This has raised several concerns in the sub-region and questions the relevance of the regional organization, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, with respect to the maintenance of peace and security in the West African region. Several reasons have been given for coups in Africa, including modernization, cultural pluralism, soldiers' greed and grievances, poor governance, corruption, autocracy, limited economic growth, and low income levels, among other factors. Many of the discussions on the causes of military coups in Africa have focused on internal actors and factors, and thus underestimating the pivotal role of foreign entities, while a few external factors such as colonial heritage and the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union have been included in the causes of military coups in Africa. This video begins by establishing the link between neo-colonialism and military coups in Africa before discussing how military coups in Africa are politics by other means. The idea of neo-colonialism merged when the first generation of political leaders in modern African states, including Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Nigeria's Nnamdi Azikiwe, were confronted with post-independence contradictions. These African leaders realized that they had political power but not economic control of their states, despite achieving independence from their colonizers. Alex Saki, Ghana's former foreign minister, who is credited with internationalizing the term neo-colonialism at the United Nations General Assembly meeting in 1958, defines neo-colonialism as the practice of granting a sort of independence with the concealed intention of making the liberated country a client state and controlling it effectively by means other than political ones. Putting it differently, neo-colonialism underlines both the transfer of political power from the European colonizers to African leaders and the persistence of foreign control of African economies through other means. Or, as Kwame Nkrumah argued, the essence of neo-colonialism is that the state which is subject to it is in theory independent and has all the outward trappings of international sovereignty. In reality, its economic system and thus its political policy is directed from outside. Neo-colonialism is also visible in how former colonizers, including France and Britain, have undermined Africa's political stability through coups. It is a well-known fact that the US Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, was assisted by Britain to finance, mastermind, and interrogate the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah in 1966 because they considered him the greatest threat to their interests. Furthermore, the former colonizers are alleged to be linked to several political assassinations in Africa. France has been accused of being linked to the killings of at least 22 African presidents since 1963, that's including Burkina Faso's Thomas Sankara. Despite the idea of neo-colonialism helping to understand several political and socio-economic issues, including coups in modern Africa, several attempts have been made to discredit the term since its inception. Alex Douglas Home, a former British Foreign Secretary, claimed in 1964 that there is no place in Britain's political dictionary for the term neo-colonialism, as it is not real. Neo-colonialism has also been associated with outdated vulgar forms of Marxism and dependency theory, as well as uncompromising African leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah and Robert Mugabe, who have been labeled tyrants. Currently, neo-colonialism is widely used in African, British, and other political discourses as it is relevant for understanding modern Africa and some other societies. Given the long-standing link between foreign powers and insecurities in Africa, one cannot ignore the involvement of both local and foreign actors in the current wave of military coups in Africa. In September 2021, news broke of how Mali's current military regime initiated a move to hire Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group, which has been accused of serious human rights abuses in Africa. The critical question that arose from this news was whether the Russian mercenaries and/or any other foreign groups were involved in the coup that toppled Mali's president Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in 2020. In summary, the idea of neo-colonialism helps to understand how both foreign and local actors come together to fuel military coups in Africa, among other insights. Most sub-Saharan African states can still be classified as neo-colonial since they continue to depend heavily on external support, including military and economic aid, for their survival. Against this backdrop, foreign powers find it relatively easy to fuel political and socio-economic problems, including coups in sub-Saharan Africa, whenever this will help advance their interests. Yes, he who feeds you controls you. One distinctive feature of military institutions, as pointed out in the introduction, is their access to weapons and coercive force, generally for the state's protection. It follows that military institutions' significance usually comes to light during interstate wars, organized violence carried on by political units against each other, and local combats, that is organized violence between governments and rebels. War is therefore the military dimension of society, since state armies are born out of and require cooperation from society to fight wars. In turn, war has been understood as part of politics ever since von Clausewitz famously argued, war is a continuation of political intercourse with a mixture of other means. Indeed, the declaration of strategies of war require deep thinking and effective policies for states to engage in combat. Similarly, military coups are a continuation of politics by other means because coup plotters need to think critically about why, when, and how to topple political regimes. In this vein, Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré cited the failure of the country's ousted Lieutenant Colonel Paul Henri Damimbato contained violence by Islamic militants as a key reason why the military had to stage the most recent coup in this West African state. Traoré and his military colleagues were smart enough to identify a major weakness in Paul Henri Damimbato's regime, which is the rising using insecurities in Burkina Faso as a justification for the coup. Also, deep insecurities, weak political leadership and corruption have been highlighted as the key factors that led to Colonel Assimi Goïta's overthrow of Mali's President Banda and Prime Minister Mokhtar Ouane in 2020. It follows that the degree of success and failure in coup plotters is heavily dependent on the depth of knowledge and quality of tactical mobilization by the military. Any display of incessant power abuse, careless leadership, ill-thought-out political decisions, perceived and actual widespread corruption, and regime weakness, among other factors which distance political leadership from the pride of citizens, increases the chances of military coup occurrence. This is evident in West Africa, where the political system works for the political class that are well paid, that enjoy a lot from the state resources, and who display arrogance and complete lack of concern about the welfare of citizens, thereby creating conducive conditions for military coups. Therefore, in place of the conventional way of understanding military coups as interrupting politics in Africa and elsewhere, military takeovers needs to be understood as politics using arms to change governments forcibly. In general, the discussion of military diplomacy has focused on how armies, including those in the US, help to spread democracy and engage in humanitarian interventions, among other diplomatic duties. However, military diplomacy, particularly in the West African region, is also characterized by military coups. As opposed to political parties that mostly lose and win elections based on their past achievements and campaign strategies, the failure and success of the military coups are largely dependent on the armed strategies that the military adopts and the weakness of the state. The effectiveness of military tactics, including the timing of the coups, public grievances at stake, and help from the foreign allies, contributes significantly to successful coups in neo-colonial Africa. While the tenure of military regimes that assume political power through coups may be short-lived and not under constitutional rule, they take full control of states during their time in office, just as a democratically elected governments do. Military coups are a constitution of politics by other means, unlike democratic governments with political mandates based on constitutions and elections outcomes, among other things. The political mandate of the military coup leaders stems from the barrel of the gun.